Welcome back, fight fans, DAZN MMA with Sean O'Connell and Dan Hardy. We're now separated by an entire ocean and most of the continental United States as well. But this past weekend, Dan Hardy was right next to me, and it was glorious for PFL Europe 2 in Berlin. Lightweights, bantamweight, one women's flyweight fight that was some unfinished business that we had to take care of. Some incredible showcases. My first takeaway, Berlin is a phenomenal city, a phenomenal fight city. I need to go back there. What a night it was in Berlin.
Yeah, a beautiful city, an awesome venue. The crowd was great, and every single one of the fighters, they came to fight. They came to show their best performances. We had some amazing finishes. We had some good back and forths. I was really happy with it, and I think the face-offs that we got afterwards, especially after a couple of the fights, moving on to Paris, I think it makes for very interesting storytelling around the fact that these guys came through the same event together. We got that face-off, there's that tension. They went away for a few weeks to kind of retrain and peak ready for September 30th, and then we're going to see them in Paris in a short time.
I'm so happy we don't have to wait long. I mean, September 30th is right around the corner. Time flies in the world of combat sports. We'll get to how the brackets are set, all of the matchups for Paris, but I want to just highlight a couple of performances that took place in the showcase bouts. We opened the night with two women who were just starting out their mixed martial arts careers. Both Ruby Mesu and Christina Breuer have kickboxing backgrounds and are making the transition into MMA. And I mean, we got a striking fight here, but Christina Breuer looked absolutely unbelievable. I mean, you can see why she's 17-2 as a pro kickboxer. The stage wasn't too big. The moment wasn't too big. She went out. She performed, looked absolutely stellar. And I think if she's bringing her grappling along with the same kind of aplomb and composure that we're seeing from her in striking, she's going to be a big-time problem for any woman at 145 pounds.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, and the thing is, she knows that's where people are going to try and expose her. I think one of the reasons why Ruby Mesu was struggling to get started was, I mean, partly because of the pace and the striking of Breuer, but also because she was probably expecting Breuer to try and take her down because, her other fight was a submission finish in the second round. I got the impression that Mesu was always expecting there was going to be a level change to surprise her. And Breuer just used it against her, just kept that question in her mind, kept a good pace on her until she started to really connect with some meaningful shots. I was very, very impressed, and we'll definitely see her on a PFL event in the future. She's uninjured. I'd like to see her, as soon as possible, really. But we'll see. I mean, she's a featherweight. We have women's featherweight over in the US, I think, with a bit more experience. I'd like to see her in that mix and really test her MMA game.
And the reason I bring up a performance like that, I mean, it's someone improving to 1-0 as a pro mixed martial artist, right? That's what PFL Europe is all about. Finding the best rising talent in Europe and giving them a path, whether it takes a year or 2 years or 5 years, giving them a path to compete on the global stage, right? We've said it a lot. It's the Champions League of mixed martial arts, but in some ways, if you're familiar with the American baseball, with Major League Baseball farm system or the academy systems over there in football or soccer in Europe, this is what you need to do now with real professional athletes, right? You need to identify talent when they're early in their trajectory, early in their career, and you need to bring them along in such a way that, facilitates their proper development and success. And I think that's a good example of someone, if the career is handled correctly, could be a household name, 5 years in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we'll see that steady progression as well. The team around her, they know what they've got to work on, but they also know where she's best, and they're going to try and, amplify those striking skills within MMA. And, with the small gloves, with the ability to trap people against the fence and use her knees, I think she's got a bright future. And, and as I said, I think, through 2024, we'll hopefully be seeing her on some more PFL Europe events. And, I'll try and find some tough, challenging matchups for her, because I do want to see, where her takedown offense is at, what her jiu-jitsu looks like, her submission defense. And ultimately, if we can put, a few more fights on her record and a bit more experience, I feel like she'll be ready to step up to the global level.
Someone who's, I think, gonna have a hard time being patient. I'm actually impressed when you get him calmed down after fights and you talk to him about the trajectory of a very promising career. We saw in a showcase bout. I had people messaging me saying like, "Wait, why is he a showcase fighter still? Why is he not in the PFL Europe season? Why is he not going to be in this bracket?" And it's a hard question to answer unless you're just saying he's 22 years old, bringing him along the right way. And of course, I'm talking about the McGrizzla, Lewis McGrillen, 2-0 now in the PFL cage, 2-0 in PFL Europe, and continues his incredible knockout streak. The left hand, it took until the second round this time, but he dialed it in. He landed it innumerable times in the first round. But Amrali Saidosharov was so tough, wore a bunch of them, battled back, and then early in the second round, the McGrizzla throws that one all the way from the hip, separates Amrali from his consciousness.
It was just a beautiful punch. And, the first round is really what we needed to see to test, see what McGrillen would be able to do moving backwards, because Saidosharov's, he's a big, powerful individual. He likes to put himself right in the pocket so he can counterpunch. And, he's got heavy hands. We saw McGrillen wear a couple of big shots as well, and he took them well. He recovered, he got on his feet, got on his toes, and he showed us some good footwork. And, after going back to his corner at the end of the first round, you could see that it just took that 60 seconds for them to kind of calm him down, center him, and give him the necessary information to land the shot correctly. And what was it, 12 seconds into the second round, and he tried the same punch twice. He went first with it, and the range was not quite right. And the second time he landed it perfectly. And I was chatting to his coach Carl Prince, and he was saying, look, this is something that we've been drilling. It's a technique that suits him really well because everyone's expecting the left hand. We talked about it just before his fight on the broadcast, I think, about the fact that he's very good at varying the delivery of his left hand because it's expected. Against Kulikan, he was posturing to the body and then swinging around the side and kind of confusing the guard of his opponent while Kulikan was on the back foot, and then snuck the left hand through the guard and knocked him out. His ability to deliver the left hand you've got to liken it to McGregor. I mean, I don't want to sound cliche, but you can see the similarities with the confidence and the talk, as well as the ability to build his game around that powerful left hand strike that he's got.
Yeah, future's so bright for Lewis McGrillen, and he has that sort of wild man mentality, that wild man persona, that when you put a microphone in front of him, you're going to have to hit the bleep button, you're going to have to try and craft your questions and things like that. But when you get him at the hotel, right? You get him at breakfast or whatever, and you're talking to him, there's a lot of maturity there. And there's a lot of acknowledgement of like, yeah, look, I'm good, I'm talented. I haven't shown everyone my skill set yet, but there's a lot of work left to be done. So I can't wait to follow the trajectory of that young man's career. And he's being patient with it. He and his camp are being patient with it, whether that's natural or that's something that Dan Hardy, as the director of fighter operations, has helped to ensure. It's been good to see. Now let's get into the actual brackets. We started with lightweights, and then we figured it out all the way up to the main event. The bantamweights trying to punch their ticket to Paris. Relatively, it's not a quick turnaround, but it is much like the PFL global season, where you don't get to fight and then get fat and out of shape again. All of these winners that are fighting in Paris now, they're going to have to go back, heal the bumps and bruises as quickly as possible, and get right back into camp. And that's what most of them, said they were planning on doing. And that maybe is why people were out there fighting so aggressively, trying to get it done early. We had a lot of first round finishes.
Yeah, we had some really strong performances, and and some surprising ones as well. People fighting very smart. I mean, Dylan Tuke was the one that stood out for me on the night, really kind of sticking to a clever game plan. Constantly using that movement to frustrate Connor Hughes and putting him on the end of those sniping straights, and then using his grappling to be able to tie him up, take his back. I think it was a frustrating night for Connor Hughes, and You know, I know we'll see him back. I expect him to be out again before the end of the year on one of the PFL Europe shows. But you know, for Dylan Tuke, I think he showed a new level to his game, a new level of composure, and I think moving forward against, you know, Kasuba, he's going to need it because, you know, although Maxim landed a really nice throw, ultimately Kasuba, you know, he just looked, you know, too dominant, too strong, too big, was able to take his back and get the choke, and he's going to be a tough test for Tuke no matter where the fight goes. So, you know, we're going to see him need to keep leveling up, as we would expect with all of these fighters in the playoffs. You know, next level is what we need to see.
Jakub Kasuba with the first round rear naked choke over Radu Maxim, and just the way that he was able to come out on top in scrambles, and even after getting thrown was able to establish a dominant position and things like that. And then you saw in the face-off, right? And Dylan Tuke is large at 155 pounds, right? He's at least 6 feet tall, well-muscled, and the same is true of Jakub Kasuba. I mean, both of these guys were big, shredded lightweights, and they don't seem to like each other very much.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just think that's Dylan Tuke for you. He's able to fire people up, and he's able to turn people against him if they're going to fight him. I mean, you know, ultimately, you know, Dylan and Connor, they would have been good friends. We talked about that on the Last Word episode. They if they'd have been trained in the same gym, they would have gotten along very well. But in this situation, you kind of put a wall up because you're fighting these guys, and you know, I think Dylan Tuke embraces that. He likes to be fiery. He likes to get under people's skin, and I feel like Kasuba, he's just confident that he's going to win, which is why, you know, he fronted up to him so quickly. Interestingly, though, I will quick mention this: Dylan Tuke is keen to move down to featherweight once he, you know, if he wins the championship this year, he wants to go straight over to global at featherweight. So imagine the size of him down at 145; it'd be ridiculous.
Well, look, that camp has weight cutting down to a science, because Stevie Ray was in his corner coaching him, right? And Stevie Ray is an absolute monster at lightweight. Stevie Ray was walking around the hotel. He fought, 3 weeks ago? And he's like 192 pounds now without fat on him. So Stevie and company, they know exactly how to cut weight and how to get down to where you need to do. So if that's the plan for Dylan Tuke, I won't doubt the ability to do it coming out of that camp. I can't imagine wanting to do it, because you're going to have to suffer to make that weight. So you've got Kasuba and Dylan Tuke on one side of the bracket, and then the other side of the lightweight bracket was affected by weight cutting problems. And this is something we have to talk about, because part of being a professional fighter, being a professional mixed martial artist, you have to make the damn weight. You just do. It's part of the job. And in the PFL, not only do you lose part of your purse, but both on the global scene, in PFL Europe, and when we do PFL Middle East, North Africa, it's going to be this way. PFL Australia, it's going to be this way. PFL South Africa, it's going to be this way. Or excuse me, South America, it's going to be this way. You are going to lose points in the standings or points in a fight if you don't make weight. You're going to be penalized as a competitor if you don't make weight. And that happened to Akoidan Duque, who came in against a very tough Alex Chijov, a guy that a lot of people think is one of the favorites in the bracket. Duque won the fight, out-grappled him, had a better game plan. But he had put himself in a situation where he had to get a finish in order to advance. He couldn't allow Chijov to even win a round if he wanted to advance, because he put himself behind on the judges' scorecards, and the tiebreaker on a draw was the guy who makes weight gets to move on. So Akoidan Duque has to look at it and say, wow, my fight performance was really good against a tough competitor. I did what I needed to do to get my hand raised at the end of that fight. But you didn't. You don't get to move on and fight for $100,000 eventually if things go well. You don't get to go fight in Paris because you didn't make weight. And it's a tough pill to swallow, but it's the right thing, Dan.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree. I mean, it's disappointing, but I think we've got to address this situation where people are, you know, are missing weight and coming in and fighting, because ultimately, you know, you sacrifice a percentage of your purse, but by the time fight night comes around, you know, all's fair and even. And especially in the, you know, the regular season playoff and championship format, we need to make sure that the playing field is as even as possible for competition. And to be honest, I like the rule. I don't. There's anything wrong with if you're gonna, push your luck and disrespect your opponent on weigh-in day, you can't expect to be able to be stepping into the smart cage all fair on fight night. You know, I feel like, I mean, you look at his performance, and it was a good performance as far as scoring takedowns, controlling, but it wasn't dynamic. And I've got to wonder whether his battle against the scales, took some of that firepower out of his performance, and that's why it was maybe a little bit slower than it would needed to be. Chizov's a very, very good fighter. The smart thing to do, of course, was for Duque to use his grappling skills, but I don't know. I'm disappointed for him at the same time as frustrated with him, because he cut a lot of weight. He put his back up against the wall, and when you do that, you need your back up against the wall going into the smart cage, because that's the way that we even the playing field. And unfortunately for him, Chizov had a really good second round.
Yeah.
He almost put him away a couple of times, but then he was able to get the fight back to the floor in the third and win that round as well. So 2 rounds up on the scorecards. The point deduction for the weight miss evens the scorecards, makes it a draw, and then in a tiebreaker situation, the person that made weight moves through. So Chizov goes through to Paris, and Duque learns a harsh lesson. And and I don't know where he moves on to now. Perhaps he'll find his way back to PFL, but we need to see him step on the scales at 155. If he's going to be a regular face in the season.
So Chizov moves on, and he'll take on John Mitchell, who won a unanimous decision over Yeshim Dahoish. That side of the bracket, not as vitriolic, not as much in the face-off, not as much intensity or trash talking, but whoever wins out of that one will take on the winner of Kashuba and Dylan Tuke. And that brings us, of course, to our bantamweights. And this bracket, this regular season setting up the bracket, really delivered. These matchups were incredible. I kept saying it on the night, but you really did a good job matchmaking for this, because even in some losing performances, right, some of the guys who didn't get their hand raised looked excellent. But man, these winners earned their spot in Paris, and I think have given us some really fascinating matchups.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it would be interesting to see what Franz Malambo looks like, because he was quite disappointed with his performance. He felt like his timing was off, but I felt like he had a very tough individual in front of him in Rashid Haz, who has got a very diverse skill set and was a short notice replacement. Of course, he was meant to be fighting Dom Woodin, so that was a good shift for Malambo to be able to take on someone at short notice and to still be as effective as he was. I mean, the punch, was it a right check hook that he landed in the third round? It just folded Haz on the spot. I don't know how he recovered from it. It was incredible. But Malambo moving through, now fighting Nutsi, who had a beautiful first round finish against Farbod. And I was disappointed for Farbod, because of course he had a lot of support in Berlin. A lot of people came out to watch him, as a representative of Spitfire Gym. He got a good takedown early, but just wasn't able to keep Nutsi on the floor for very long. And then the setup head kick, it's just what Nutsi's very, very good at, hiding his techniques, stitching things together. Caught him perfectly behind the left hand, slipped him onto a kick. What a fascinating fight that is, because Malambo's very, very tricky and very experienced, but Nutsi looks like he's a sharpshooter. I think he's taken on a new level since he had that fight against Mokhtar Benkasi, who I also hope will come back for Paris, because I'd like to see him on that card.
Yeah, that was an unbelievable co-main. So Nutsi versus Malambo, that match is set up. Francesco Nutsi, find yourself a quiet place, turn the sound up, and listen to the shin landing on the neck and head of Farbod Iranijad. It was a moment, I'll say that. Francesco Nutsi earned that victory, and now he's earned himself a really fascinating matchup in Paris against Franz Malambo. Now, Mokhtar Benkasi versus Khurshid Kokarov. This was an unbelievable back and forth fight. I mean, Khurshid looked so good, and Benkasi just would not go away. He got punch, kick, kneed, the kitchen sink thrown at him, and he was still in the fight to the final bell.
He was, he was, and frustrated at the final bell as well, because he didn't feel like he was really able to get into the fight. You know, you've got to respect his pressure and his determination, but the striking, the variety in the striking of Kakarov was incredible. You know, Superman punch to low kick, and you know, just all kinds of really creative stuff that was coming out of left field and catching Ben Casey. You know, I was very impressed with both of them. I expected nothing less from Ben Casey, because you know, he's a what, 28 fight veteran and never been stopped. He's a very durable and experienced individual. But we saw, you know, we saw a new level from Kakarov, and then the face off afterwards. I know we've not talked about Ali Taleb's finish with Bortoluzzi yet, but I mean, what a face off that was. Like, those two would have kept the gloves on and thrown down there and then. Like, I thought you were going to have to break out your refereeing shirt for a moment when you were interviewing. It was a very fiery back and forth. I can't wait for that fight as well.
Yeah, when I was standing there very briefly between them, I was glad I weigh 100 pounds more than both of them, because there was some intensity, right? So Ali Taleb advanced with a knockout victory over Kenji Bortoluzzi, just a beautiful hook, and then the nasty ground and pound right after. I mean, it was a textbook performance for someone who's got that compact, powerful striking style. So Ali Taleb versus Khurshid Kakarov, that is going to be fireworks. And both of these guys, because of that intensity and because of that trash talk, right? They put not only a trip to the final in Dublin, like the stakes are high enough with that, but there's going to be a lot of pride on the line in this fight, because they're already insulting one another in person, face to face, and also on social media.
Yeah, Ali Taleb was not impressed with his performance. And that was the way that George St. Pierre would say it. That was not the way that Ali Taleb said it. I thought it was brilliant. You know, it just kind of sets the stage for those two guys to, you know, spend a few weeks in preparation for one another, and then you know, get stuck in Paris. We're just gonna have to be on point. You're gonna have to come in a few days early, I'm afraid, Sean, and just make sure you're keeping those two apart, because I don't want them throwing down before they get into the smart cage. They're both like, Ali Taleb is like, he's practically on fire. He's you know, he's so intense, and just Kakarov just reflects anything that's coming back at him as far as intensity. I'm fascinated for that fight. I honestly can't see which way it's going to go, because they're both strong wrestlers with really good striking, and they're both lethal with their power. I mean, you know, this bantamweight bracket is really impressive. I mean, the lightweights are strong, but the level in the bantamweights for me is just a slight level higher, and I think we're going to see, you know, we could see, you know, 2 or 3 of these guys progress to the global bantamweight division, you know, and really show themselves as world-class fighters.
And at the end of the day, I look at all the possible matchup scenarios for a final in Dublin at bantamweight, and I'm just like, would I want to see Malambo versus Taleb? Yes, I would want to see that. Would I want to see Nutsi versus Kakarov? Yeah, I would definitely want to see that. Would I want to see Nutsi versus Taleb? 100% I want to see a fight like that, right? Malambo versus Kakarov. All of these are great opportunities for the fight fan to get fascinating matchup, exciting final. And that's kind of what you hope for at the end of a season, right? You want the championship to be played, the championship to be contested against 2 teams, two camps, in this case, 2 individuals who are going to bring out the best of one another. And I think we're virtually guaranteed that at bantamweight. The final order of business was that we haven't talked about it. Chronologically, it wasn't the final order of business, but there was a women's flyweight bout that was supposed to happen in Newcastle. It ended up happening before our co-main event, and Grant Eckhout was victorious over Lorena Cabrero, who just, you know, valiant effort from her at 18 years of age, just wasn't able to deal with the strength in the grappling of Eckhout.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it was always, you know, a striker v grappler matchup. I think Gret is smart enough and experienced enough to know where to take the fight to have her best advantage. You know, we saw Cabrero land some good strikes when she was able to keep it on the feet for moments, you know, good calf kicks and good counter punching, but, you know, there's still work to do for her, of course. And, you know, she's 3-1 now. She's got plenty of time. You know, I'm going to have a conversation with her team, and hopefully we can get her, you know, a couple more fights, you know, perhaps on the local scene over in GMC. and see if we can expand on her ground game, and maybe see if we can bring her back next year. I'd like to see if she's ready. If she's able to pick up a couple of wins and show some takedown defense and some grappling defense, then I'll feel like she might be ready in 6 months' time to be considering the women's flyweight division again next year, because we've got some other exciting young prospects that are ready to start that division for 2024. She's still got a long career ahead of her. I didn't have my first pro fight till I was 22. She's she's 4 years younger than that right now, and she's already 4 fights in. I feel like she's very promising, and you got to remember that she's around Christina Breuer, who's got excellent striking, and Anatoly Bal, who really impressed me against Sebastian Santana Guedes. I feel like they've got a really good team, and I think she's going to benefit from that experience around her. And it won't take her long to progress and get to the level where she's competitive with these flyweights in the regular season.
So that count will take on Valentina Skitidze in a semifinal in Paris. And then you've got Ditcheva Hermanson on the other side of that bracket, right? I already told you who our bantamweight fights are. We talked about who our lightweight fights are. And of course, at light heavyweight, you've got Neto versus Salomon. Anthony Salomon fighting in Paris on a on a playoff tip where if he wins, and he'll probably have to pull off an upset there. I haven't looked at the odds officially, but Neto looked formidable in Newcastle, right? I mean, that's going to be exciting for the fans. And then, of course, you've got Simeon Powell versus Abdullah El Rami. Both of those guys coming off of big-time finishes in their bouts in Newcastle. So that's a stellar card. And it's going to be capped off by the biggest combat sports star in France, Cedric Doumbé, who I saw the little eyebrow thing there, Dan. This is what you wanted the whole time, right? The plan for Cedric Doumbé was to put him in the global season, throw him right in with the Wolves at 170 pounds. An injury took him out of that. And the whole time, everyone else, we were all lamenting it. Like, oh, man, I wanted to see Doumbé in the global season. Everyone except Dan Hardy, who was just, as the director of fighter operations for Europe, was just like, that means I'm going to get him in Paris. And I was like, you're not going to get him in Paris. They're going to keep him. They're going to keep him on the global trajectory. But of course, Dan Hardy gets his way.
Of course, I got a suitcase full of money, and I got an iron pipe around my back that I'm hiding from you guys. Just give him a little tap on the knee and make sure he's delayed a little bit. No, honestly, it was unfortunate that he was injured, but to be honest, to be able to have him make his PFL debut in Paris and and really celebrate who Cedric Doumbé is as a martial artist is going to be awesome. And it'll be great for the rest of the fighters on the card as well, because he'll bring an additional layer of attention to it. I know tickets are rolling out the door. It's the Doumbé effect. And people have not even seen the other fights that I'm adding to the card yet. We've got all the playoff bouts that you've spoken about, but I've got some other fights on the card, and I can't tell you more right now, but I'm very excited about these matchups. And there's going to be there's going to be a lot of French fighters on this card that are looking to progress next year. I'm excited to start not only looking forward to the Paris card and these matchups, but also what that's going to create for the Dublin event, which is going to be even bigger, a lot higher stakes, 100 grand on the table for a bunch of these fighters. And then we're rolling into 2024. It's such an incredible thing that the PFL are doing in Europe. There's so many fighters that need opportunities to compete, and this will bring that consistency that the region's needed for a long time. Opportunities for fighters to work their way up, to progress, move on to global pay-per-view events. Who knows what else? But it's the pathways laid out for them. All they have to do is keep winning and keep being successful.
This is the last thing, and you don't get to talk during this part because I'm just going to let people know that when you see someone like Dan Hardy assume a new role, right? Former fighter, and I've always been an advocate for former fighters, retired fighters, pseudo-retired fighters, whatever, to be more involved on the administrative level in the sport of mixed martial arts. I've been saying this for 15 years, that the sport needs to be run by fighters, right? And behind the scenes in Berlin was a perfect example of why that should be the case, okay? Because I watched Dan Hardy, and I joke about this all the time. I'm like, I want you know, they should make me the director of fighter operations somewhere. They should give me this role somewhere. And then I watched Dan Hardy running around, not only all week putting out fires, but also on fight night, not just handling fighters and camps and their concerns. As director of fighter operations, that probably falls within the purview, right? But making sure that the lighting was right, making sure that the sound was right, making sure that the conditions for these fighters to step out into the smart cage and to be able to have a perfect place to showcase their abilities, making sure that that was ideal is something that Dan Hardy very clearly took to heart and was very clearly committed to on every level. And it was really cool to watch. Someone who has a little bit of power in the organization, making sure that everything was right for the fighters, like to the finest minute detail, is why Dan Hardy got the job. And why I'm like, man, maybe I don't need a job like that, because you put on every hat in the whole building and you did it all. And I just want to acknowledge that. I was truly, truly impressed. And I appreciate, as someone who was in that role as a fighter for many years, know like how cool it is to know that, you know, the guy, the face of the PFL Europe organization, cares about how everything is going for me and for my camp. So you did a great job.
Thank you. That means a lot. That means a lot. You know, I had a good team around me. You know, my wife was there helping out. She was awesome. Doesn't get the thanks that she deserves. Paul Reed, who's going to be supporting me in my role as director of fighter ops, was awesome as well. Eduardo does an amazing job. You know, the whole team, PFL Europe, PFL Global. But you know, it's a pleasure to do the job and to watch these young fighters, you know, work their way through their career and, you know, have success and failure and you know, good experiences along the way in a, you know, a safe and you know, well curated environment that's going to make the best of their skills and their abilities. I appreciate your kind words, my friend. Thank you.
I'll say this, everyone is great at their job, right? I don't know how many people are going to be on the commentary desk, also director of fighter operations, and remove the headset during the night to go talk to the in-house DJ to make sure that he's turning the sound down so the fighters can hear their names announced. Like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. While you're supposed to be on the desk, there was an issue with some of the audio, and the in-house DJ was drowning out Andy Shepard, our ring announcer, our cage announcer. So fighters they didn't get to hear their names called in front of the crowd, right? And then someone backstage, probably Eduardo or Melissa, was just like, hey, you can go ahead and walk out, right? But they didn't get that moment until Dan Hardy made sure they got the moment. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. I love it. The passion, it matters on every level. So
hey,
applause for my friend Dan Hardy, who did a great job.
That was more for his benefit. He played McGrillen. He didn't play the right music for Lewis McGrillen. I thought he was going to be the first of 2 KOs of that night. You know, he was within inches of his life. So I thought I'd best, you know, save him any further danger and go and enlighten him of the issues. Yeah, you know, it's a part of it. I've been there before. I've had, you know, music played too quiet, too loud, the wrong thing, you know, announced. It's just you want to feel appreciated and looked after. And when you've put all that work in, you want to walk out and the moment to be right. You know, lights, camera, and action. You know, the action part, the lights and camera have got to be there ready to receive it. And you know, you know, to oversee these fighters' careers, it kind of feels like it's part of my job. And also to keep the DJ safe from these fighters if he plays the wrong music.
PFL Europe rolls on. Berlin in the rear view, Newcastle in the rear view. We're headed to Paris on September 30th with some incredible matchups and still some matchups yet to be announced. Can't wait for that. We'll see you there.